Hello, folks. Welcome.
Life is an illusion. We can start getting into.
Hello, folks. Welcome. We're going to have audio in this room.
Hi, Lee.
Hi. Well, sorry for the delay. We'll get as many people as we can in. We're going to do this. I'm going to record it, and we'll post it for everybody later. So what do you know? We'll do the best we can. But I wanted to do a live class and interact with folks. So this we got.
All righty, sir.
Give everybody a little time to get in, and we'll get going. Folks, we don't have to stop. We can stay as long as we want now. It's our class. This is kind of cool. Come on in, folks. Welcome, welcome. We'll get going in just a second, letting everybody pop in. See if we can crash a Zoom room like we crashed YouTube. Just a reminder, if you can, keep yourself muted. We'll take questions appropriately, but let's keep your background noise down.
Ulysses had a secret agenda. He wanted the kids to recover a small alien spaceship.
YouTube.
And this is a sea turtle I swam with. Yes, I mixed in some of the So the kids found the spaceship, but some giant aliens jacked it to kidnap Melvin. So now the school ship is headed to rescue Melvin, even though he's Melvin. And this is the cool or nothing store where I bought a new book because a turtle ate my book.
Let's see. Oh, the power of being the host. All right, we're filling up the room. This is cool. Cool.
So everyone was frozen for the trip. Everyone.
Missing somebody though that's still got their mic open. If they could close that for me, I'd appreciate it. So avoid any background noise. All right, nice backup play. Hey, you know, whatever, we'll just make this work. This is filling up. This is nice. Let's keep going. All right, cool. Yeah, please mute everybody, and everybody's getting in. Let me make sure. I think we've gotten, looks like we've got a really good crowd. I appreciate that, everybody hanging around. Sorry about the technical difficulty. There was some issue with the back end streaming it, so that's fine. We'll fix it. It's what we do where I am here at Covered 6. We teach a lot of online classes, so we're just going to use our own room here. Let's see. I got all the power. I think we've got everybody in. Meeting ID should be valid. Come on into Zoom. Let me chant one more time. Make sure that number's correct. Yep, that's right. Everything's good. Cool. All right. Let me share my screen. I think we almost got a few people typing in Discord. You think I need some more monitors? Nah. Let me get my presentation back up here. And I promise there's not many slides, nor will we be in a presentation very long. But perfect. All right. So, all right. Looks like we're getting most people in. We'll give just a second or more, and a couple seconds more, and we will, cool. It looks like everybody's coming in. Most of the people got a big turnout here. I really appreciate that. It's very cool. So like I said, we'll get that all, we'll get this recorded, and then be able to make sure that everybody can see it later. One more reminder again, please make sure you're muting your sound when you're in. Cool. Let me pull up my chat. All right. Cool. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully this will work pretty smooth for us for the rest of the evening. This is actually the background that you folks are seeing from my screen is actually our knock. I'm not in the knock. This is our background from it. I had some of our marketing folks make this for me. So when it was safe to take pictures, we obviously couldn't be streaming from a knock live if we had, sensitive stuff up there. So, but it's pretty cool, huh? Yeah, it looks nice. And so anyway, my name, I'll go on to the next slide. We were stuck for quite a long time in the audio. Yeah, please mute, folks. Everybody stay muted.
Nossa, tem até vontade de fazer esse negócio aqui, porque abacaxi, você faz a caldinha dele para fazer a base.
There we go. Sometimes I can control and mute if I can find the right thumbnail to grab. Got that there. So cool. All right, mute.
Hey, Lee,
All
if
right.
you want to give me permissions, I can mute people for you.
Okay, cool. I got you. Hang on a second there. We can also make you the host for now, as long as I still have screen. Yeah, we'll make you the host there, Ron. Perfect. All right, cool. So you can help me keep track of that.
Good deal.
I got my screen shared. I think we're in good shape. All right, cool. Everybody's in. Appreciate you folks hanging out. I don't even know how many we got in here, like 60 some. That's pretty cool. We probably lost a few. My name's Lee McWhorter. I'm the CTO of Coverage 6. We're kind of a unique cybersecurity and physical security firm out here in California. You can find us online, and you can find me at LinkedIn and Twitter. These are my certs I've gotten in just the last couple of years. I have a bunch of others as well, but you know, they didn't do badges back then, and so that was enough to fill up the screen. Please give record. I don't mind that if you want to. If you can do that for me, Ron, you can let people record. We're going to record it ourselves and we'll post it, but I have no problem. This is public, and so we'll be sharing with everybody, so that's totally cool. You can record your own copy. What we're going to do today is, this is kind of a interesting name, Attacking Level 3, but of course Level 3, pretty much Layer 3 gives us the whole world. And what we're talking about is I really want to focus on teaching you folks how to build your own kind of holistic cyber ranges. So we're going to show you some about Gns3, and I know that we'll talk about that, a few issues. Still can't hear. You got to make sure that should be everybody else can. I think we may have sometimes you have to mute or unmute or refresh yourself, but hopefully we'll be in pretty good shape. We are going to try to teach you. I've been using Gns3 for a lot of years. I use it in lots of different programs. When I taught the PenTest Plus, trained the trainer for CompTIA, for our program here, our cybersecurity program here at Coverage 6. So we build a lot of them and use them as really cool ranges. It's neat to be able to, a lot of people have always, all of us have done, pretty much a, cyber range of some kind, and some more than others. But, it's also always kind of interesting to be able to build your own. And sometimes instead of just pulling up a VM and hitting another VM, it's actually kind of cool to be able to have the entire environment, routers, switches, intrusion detection, everything else. And so it's kind of what the goal of this is today. So the first thing I wanted to address is that I know from looking at Discord and chatting with a few people, it's not surprising. Gns3 is open source software, so there were a few issues. I really want to send some shout outs to a lot of people. Even today, I saw people answering questions. So all of you folks that were helping me by answering questions of other people who wanted to know how to get this all set up, I really, really appreciate that. I do have a couple tricks, because I know a couple people, some of the things I saw on channel. So just before we begin, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on setup, though I will promise to help later. If you're interested in this, feel free to reach out to me. Pay attention to this, this new email address at the bottom. I set this up specific for this. That's where I'm sharing all this stuff out of. I'll have a link at the end where you can download everything. But if you want to reach out to me specifically on this class, please use this email, lee.defcon28@gmail. And then I will happily answer questions and help you get this set up, or talk to you about this as we go forward. Gns3 can be a little flaky sometimes. Once you get it all set up and running, then it's a really great tool. The first thing to check, though, if you are having problems, is I always tell people, don't just start the VM itself, just out of your virtualization, your VirtualBox, your VMware, and make sure the VM runs, because it's just an Ubuntu VM that all the magic of Gns3 happens. You're basically really running VMs inside of VMs here effectively. So if the VM doesn't run, nothing else is going to work. So let's just start with the VM. And sometimes, because I know, for example, that the Gns3 VM from the group is made on a Mac, it has a different network adapter. And so there's a common error that when the first time you launch it, it throws a fit and says, hey, I can't get on. And so basically, what it is because it's not matching up to the correct host-only adapter. All you have to do literally is just go, shut the VM down, go into settings, click on your network area, and it'll update to your host-only adapter. You click OK, and it'll boot. And that's actually one of the most common problems, one of the easiest to fix. So if all else fails, check your host only adapter. If that fixes it, you should be up and running and you're good. That's a common problem. The other problem is sometimes people will get the VM to run, but it's going to say that it doesn't support KVM, kernel virtual machine, which we need. And so either something is possibly off in your BIOS, your UEFI, you're not turning on those advanced, virtualization features of your processor. And there are, surprisingly, even with modern computers, we had a batch of HPs come in for our students, and we had to go into BIOS and turn every one of them on for whatever reason. That was, I guess for security. But nonetheless, there is also a little fix, especially if you're using VirtualBox, where sometimes, even though that's turned on in BIOS, you do not actually still get it to say that KVM support is there. So and it's grayed out within the settings, but you can go down to a command prompt, go into your VirtualBox folder, run the VB manage program with this command line here on V2, and it will turn on the hardware virtualization. That's another common fix. Those are the two most common things that can go wrong with the VM itself. Once the VM is running and has KVM support, then generally it's just a matter of launching Gns3's software itself and the two will connect. If you're still not getting both of them to connect, then you want to double check that in your settings under edit preferences, and I'll show this in a minute, but that the host binding is set to localhost, so you're always talking back to yourself, and that you're using the correct virtualization. So it defaults to VMware. And if you're really using VirtualBox like I recommended, then you'll have to make sure that changed appropriately. Those are the most common things. If you have something really, really cryptic and you're still not getting this all to run, then please drop me an email and I'll happily help you over the weekend. I'm gonna be doing not a whole lot of anything except DEFCON, and I'm glad to get this class going today, and hopefully you guys will all have a lot of fun. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking too fast. I'll try to slow down a little bit. So these are just a couple fixes, though, based on I actually added this slide looking at Discord and seeing that there were some issues, and I wanted to see if maybe some of these would help. So what we're going to do in these are kind of just the quick sections. I'm going to go through these and then stop and switch over to what we're really going to do is spend our time in Gns3. I'm assuming that you do have it all up and running. If you don't, then obviously kind of watch, take notes, and then I'll help you fix it later and we can get you up and running. And we are recording this. Some individuals, I'm recording it here and we'll get it posted later on the Red Team Village repository as appropriate. So I'm gonna give you a little overview of Gns3 and some of the tricks and traps of it today. We're going to go over appliances, basically nodes of the network. There are all different kinds of cool toys that you can add in building a virtual network in Gns3. And so we'll go over a number of them, standard ones that they provide, other ones that you can add, and even just talk a little bit about how you can add standalone virtual machines as well. And then we're going to talk about all the different choices and how we could actually build a range. And what I intend to do is take you through some of this, explain some of this, show you some of this, and then I'm going to, and if you're following along, you'll be playing too, we're going to build a simple beginning starter range with some examples of all these different nodes in there, show you how some of it works, and depending on our time, we'll do what we can do. Then what I'm planning to do is whatever we build here as part of this today, then I'm going to actually export that portal as a portable project, and I will make it available for you to download as well, so you can play with it. So at the last, and I'll come back to this later, but in the later part of the slides, we will actually be, I have a link that I'll stop and make a big deal of, take a picture of it, screenshot it, whatever you want, because that link is to a document on my drive share that's not going to change, and it's going to have all the other links in it. So as long as you have that one link, then you can get to all the others, the setup instructions, the slides, and even the project once I get it exported and uploaded. So that's kind of our agenda, and except for we will come back to a few last slides at the end, but that's not my purpose today, to show a lot of slides. My purpose today is spend a lot of time hands-on with Gns3. So what I'm going to do is just do a little Alt-Tab magic here to switch over to Gns3 and bring it up to the foreground. Gns3, stands for Graphic Network Simulator. It's really a little bit of a misnomer, though, because this is not a simulator. If some of you probably are familiar with Packet Tracer, that's a simulator. Great program if you like Cisco and you know the Cisco way of doing things, so to speak. Great tool. I have it on my iPad. It's a great little tool, but it's a simulator. It's been written. Somebody's programmed the, if you type this, do that. Gns3 is actually running real emulation. It's running virtual machines. It's running Docker containers. It's running actual devices, like I said, VMs inside of a VM. So that you understand how Gns3 works, because it helps if you're trying to set it up and occasionally troubleshoot it. Excuse me. Oh, I think we just have an unmuted person. We can catch that. So Gns3 is actually, when you get down to it, there are 3 pieces so you understand its architecture. There is the Gns3 Gui we're looking at here. This is where we do most of the work, and this is what you're going to work with while building your own ranges and practicing and playing. So Gns3 has the front end software. This is the client piece, if you will. And then you're going to see references, little pop-ups all the time where it talks about connecting to the local server. That is your own computer. There is a server piece. And really that's the middleware between the VM. So the client talks to the local server, which then talks to the VM. And so if everything is working correctly, when you first boot it up, you'll see that when you bring up Gns3, Gns3 basically launches the GUI, and then it will automatically launch the VM in the background. And I'm going to pull, I think I can show that if it'll, maybe not, maybe not. But you'll see that over here on the side, we have this area called the server summary. And this is kind of the sweet spot. You're looking for these 2 green lights over here next to your own computer and next to the Gns3 VM. If that's working, then the whole system is up. They're all talking. The VM is in the background. I'm going to switch to it real fast. Not that you normally do. Now, my instructions called for you to go in here and run a few Docker pulls. That was to go ahead and preload some stuff. I didn't want everybody to have to download in the middle of our session. So what you're looking for, this is generally, you don't ever have to do it. You launch Gns3, the VM automatically comes up. You can just leave it in the background. And then when you shut down Gns3, it shuts down the VM for you. But if you do look at it, it will tell you, for example, what version you're running. It'll tell you if you've got that important KVM support. So if it says KVM support available false, then you need to tweak that. See if you can check your BIOS or try that VBox manage command. I see somebody saying 21 minutes to import. That's probably not going to take that long. It's the fact that VirtualBox, and for that matter, most programmers, I think, stink at status bars and update bars. So it will rapidly finish faster than that. But generally speaking, you just got to leave Gns3's VM in the background. You don't have to mess with it, except if you want to preload some Docker or occasionally do a little cleanup on it, maybe as you get further into it. But generally, you're going to work with the GUI. So as long as you've got these 2 green dots here and you are able, if you only see your desktop and you don't have a Gns3 VM, let me show you, before I start a project, let me talk about some of those potential fixes. So if something's not working right, then the first thing, like I said, is to just forget Gns3. Just go to VMware or VirtualBox and boot up the VM and make sure it comes up on its own. If it throws any errors, we need to fix those, because obviously if the VM is not going to run in the background, then none of this is going to run. If your VM will run, but you're still not getting it to connect, then what you want to do is go to Edit and Preferences, like I'm doing here. It brings up this very elaborate preferences screen, but the 2 parts we care about are here. The second place, which is the second choice, Server, and you're wanting to make sure right here in the middle, this host binding, see the drop down, I'm going to leave it on. We always want to leave that on 127.0.0.1. That is what the client is going to use to talk to the server. Now, the reason it's something that can be set is because in some corporate environments where this is used to simulate the office network, there may be a server out on the network that holds all the images and all the projects. And so everybody points to that. Now that's kind of a unique situation. If that's the way it is where you work or someday you run into that, then of course you can use that. For our purposes, it's always going to be local 12, no place like home, 127.0.0.1. So that's the first thing to check. So if that's okay, then cool. Then the other thing to check is you come over here to the Gns3 and you should have a checkbox. You have to have a checkbox for enable the Gns3 VM. You then have to make sure it's set to the appropriate virtualization that you want. And actually and so at that point, like it says, they actually say that they support, they recommend VirtualBox, VMware, sorry. but there is a known issue with VMware 15, or unfortunately the player version. So that's one of the reasons I recommend people generally go with VirtualBox. It does work better. And so, but those are the main things to check. So obviously if that's not checked, the enable Gns3 VM, then that's part of your problem. And sometimes if there's a problem in the install and it doesn't work during the actual install, that will be unchecked. So you can come in here and check it, and that will allow you you know, to turn it back on and start picking these choices. If you make any changes, you'll need to click OK. I am not having any issues, so I'm not going to. And so somebody asked if I could say what version. This is the version I'm running. This is so 2.2 is the current version that I'm running. They may be slightly a different version that's out there that you may have pulled down. Had to configure this option as remote. Okay, there may be something that admittedly I am using slightly, just a slight, not very far back, because I just set this box up not too long ago. And I will say this, actually, I actually tell our students, we tell them to, thank you. So I basically tell my students, once you get this up and running, don't update it, don't mess with it. It's working, you've got it working. It's like, we don't need to, though generally we want to update things for security and safety. This is one of those cases where once you finally got this working, got your two systems talking, you got the green dots there, then you're good, and you don't want to necessarily run any risk. If you do update, I will say this, you have to update the software and the VM at the same time. So, because if they get out of sync, that can be a problem. So those are sort of the known kind of common bugs and got-yous. It says, yeah, on the host-only adapter, it will need DHCP. And just so you know, actually the Gns3 VM has two adapters. The first one is a host-only adapter that should be getting an IP from the VirtualBox host-only adapter in DHCP. So by default, if you haven't changed anything, that's usually 192.168.56. So like mine, 56, 102, 101, whatever number you get from the DHCP. It can be any, as long as it's, you know, if you've set up a separate adapter or changed that number, as long as it gets an IP, that's fine. The VM also has a second adapter that uses NAT, the network address translation, and that's so it can get out and do things like Docker pulls and do updates. So, but the one that really matters is the host-only adapter. So yeah, just as a quick recap of the instructions, you have to have your virtualization. I recommend VirtualBox and its extension pack installed. Then you import into VirtualBox the Gns3 VM, make sure it's working, and then install the Gns3 software and connect them together through the installation choices. And then ideally, everything works. I know most of you, it looks like, have gotten it to work, but there are a few people that I know are still having some issues. So like I said, that lead.defcon28@gmail, I'll happily answer questions into the evening and into the weekend if people want to work on this and are still not getting it to work. And yeah, the instructions, I see somebody posted it for me. Thank you, in the Discord channel. If you go back to the Eventbrite sign up page, there's a link that clicks to my the drive for that account where I put that instruction document. And like I said, at the end of the class, I'll give you another link. You'll want to record it, screen capture it, whatever, and then you'll be able to get everything, slides, the project file, etc. All right. So what I'm going to do is just go back to where I was a second ago, which is I'm going to just create a new project. So this is where, when you first load Gns3 up, basically, it comes up to this project tab, create a new project, or it does have the ability to open a project, etc. I'm going to create a new project. So we're going to say this is going to be Red Team Village, in my case. And I guess we'll just call it, what the heck, 28, right? 28. Type the right keys, Lee. And so it creates just a blank document for you. Fairly easy. Now, what's going on here, especially for you folks new? Well, what Gns3 is like I said, a network simulator. It allows us to build virtual networks, virtual topologies, fully functional, and a lot of cool features within this program. So we just have this blank workspace. So what can we do? Well, just give us a little tour. I'll give you a little tour real fast. First, of course, there are some menus. To be honest, I hardly ever spend much time on these menus except for open, save, import, export, and a little bit of edit preferences if you got to fix something or change something. Otherwise, most of the controls I ever use are either just the buttons along the top, like starting and stopping your stuff in your projects. And then really important are these buttons out here on the side. Now, when I point and let it stand for a second, it'll say browse routers, right? Browse switches, browse end devices. I actually skip all of those and really only use these last two buttons because this is browse all devices. So if you click that, you'll see that it extends a little window up. And these should be exactly what you see. These are the default appliances that come with GNS3. So there's a little ATM switch, there's a cloud object, which allows you to connect to other networks. There is a hub, my gosh, an old hub technically available here. And then on top of that, there's of course an Ethernet switch, there's some NAT functionality, and then there's a couple basically default appliances, the virtual PC, and then the Docker, Ubuntu Docker guest. Now, if you follow the instructions and you got to be able to set that up, then you actually have a number of other things, but we have to add them into our system. And so that's the first thing we're going to do before we even start building is I'm going to take you through how do we add, because obviously we want to do more stuff, right? Okay, if you're missing the Docker, that may be on me. You have it. We're going to go through how to add all this stuff, okay? So I see that over in the Discord chat, so that's cool. I may have added that as part of one of the classes I was doing in the last few weeks, and so it's the one we're gonna attempt to add. So the reality is that they've made this a fair amount easier in GNS3 because down here at the bottom of this little screen where the list is, so here's all the ATM and Docker and virtual PC, and down at the bottom of that you see this big plus sign with the new template button. This is how we can add other appliances into our GNS3 to be able to use them, to drag them in and build networks. So if we click that, you're going to see it comes up with this dialog box. It says, are you wanting to install an appliance from the GNS3 server? In other words, one they're making available. You can import them from other locations, or you can manually create. For the most part, you really just have to do the install from the server. There are a lot of really cool options that are made available through GNS3, and we'll actually take a look at that later in the class as to things you can get. So we're going to leave the default here, and we're going to click next, and then you're going to see we have all these categories. Now, I'm just going to show you through for a moment all the things that are available. It's actually kind of amazing. Look at all these firewalls. Now, you'll notice Cisco and some name brand stuff. Now, a note about that. Yes, GNS3 will run a real Cisco router in here. You have to have the license to do it, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. So if you work at a Cisco shop and you folks are using Cisco and you have Cisco licensing, you can download the firmware and import it into GNS3 and run the exact routers or exact switches that you're running in your network. You can run them in GNS3. I am not going to be showing you any of that. We're going to be using some open source stuff. But there are all these different routers we can choose from. We can choose all kinds of different endpoints, different types of guests. You can see all the different flavors here of various things that you can use, from different flavors of Ubuntu and CentOS, just about, most flavors of Linux, at least bigger distributions. And then, of course, we have routers, and we have the ability to add, once again, all kinds of Cisco routers and Juniper and other brands. And then last but not least, we have switches as well. And there are a number of switches that are available for us to use. Now, some of these are Docker images. Some of these are virtual machines. For the most part, it doesn't really matter which is which when it comes to how you use them in GNS3. It is worth noting that, sometimes the VMs, like I'll show you when we use the open source router I'm going to use, it requires some setup because it is a full little virtual machine, so you have to install. So things like that, but the Docker, most of the Docker stuff, it's just drag and drop. You put it in and it works, right? Oh, somebody's asking about how we're going to share the recording. It'll be off where all the other recordings are, off of the main Red Team Village site or the YouTube channel. I don't know exactly where. I'll let Ron and the team address that, but I know that we'll make those available in a couple different places. So what I'm going to start with is actually the router. And the router that we're going to use, and this is the process of putting in any kind of appliance or any kind of node is the same. And we'll do a few of these so that we can have some building blocks to play with, and then we'll get into playing a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, if you're following along, you're going to scroll down here on the router list to the bottom, and even though it's got the red X, don't let that throw you off. We're going to pick this VYOS router. If you've never used it before, VYOS is an open source router. It's probably not found very often in the wild on hardware. Maybe out there, some businesses actually installed it on some metal, but more often than not, it's going to be spun up in the cloud. It's very Cisco-like if you're a Cisco person. So it actually works a lot like Cisco, even though it has its own environment, but it's completely open source, which is why I picked to use it. So we're going to select that and tell it to install, and it's going to bring us to this screen, and you'll see we don't have any other choices. If you were in a server environment, you might have the choice to put it up on the company server. I will say this is kind of one of these teacher moments, I'm going to repeat it, ding, 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 be aware. Anytime you're asked if you're going to put something into the VM, the choice is, yes, always take the Gns3 VM. Unless you have, like, using this in a company or something and you've got to use the company server. If you're just doing this on your own environment, you're going to keep it all local. And if you don't do that, if you try to run it someplace else, then the parts won't talk to each other. So we do everything inside the Gns3 VM. So then when we click next, it's telling us, what kind of, this is a QEMU, which is a virtual environment, a virtual machine. We're going to leave the default here, and generally speaking, I've never had to change the defaults of these types of things for either Docker or the VMs. And then finally it comes to this screen. Now this is a screen that confuses people sometimes. Now, because it's got all these different versions and it's saying missing file, but I can find this somewhere else, etc. But if we look really closely, and if you follow the instructions, I had you, just like I did, and they're in my download directory, I have actually downloaded this VYOS 1.18 and this empty 8 gig hard drive. And if you have them, then in principle, they should be in your download directory like mine are. They're just sitting here in the download directory, right? And that's the default. So anytime you're trying to add something into Gns3, just throw it in your download directory. That's where Gns3 looks. And so assuming you have all the pieces, then you'll see right here on this line, it says ready to install. Now the other ones, I couldn't install them because I haven't downloaded those ISOs, right? But that's fine. If you wanted the other versions, then go download the rest of the ISOs. I just wanted one I've used for a while. I like it. So we're going to go with this one. And so you pick the one that's ready to install. If you're not at that point, then that means you don't have those 2 files in your download directory. And so you can download those. Yeah, we're not going to use a remote server. We're always going to use your local Gns3 server. The only way you would ever use a remote server is like in a corporate environment. And well, unless you set up one at home yourself, but most people run it all on their own machine. We're going to pull this version. And so when we click next at that point, it says, do you want to install this? I say yes. It tells me it's going to be available in the router category, and pretty much that's it. I click finish, and after a second, Gns3 adds it in over here to the side, and now I have a router along with some other stuff that I could begin to add in. So this is fairly common. If the instructions say in one of the images out there you're looking at, they say to download these things, then you're going to download them into your download directory, and Gns3 can find them and you can work through the wizard to install it. So let's go through and add another. Let's add a different switch. I know we've got some switches, but I have a preference for a particular one. So here, once again, I'm going to choose to install from the server, which is their Gns3 up in their, So we're going to pick the switches this time. And then I'm going to scroll down to this one right here called Open vSwitch. You'll see it says Docker. So this is a Docker container, not a VM, a full VM. This is actually one of those ones I had you pull down with the Docker pull command. So this will go really quick because all we have to do is, we don't have a choice here, but install it into the recommended Gns3 VM. And at that point, we're done. And boom, we now have that over there on the side. And so you can see how easy it is, especially if you've already done all the pre-download in the background, to add these things. Now, I will tell you this. If you haven't done the Docker pulls from the command prompt of the VM like the instructions say, you can still do this. You can add anyone, but as soon as you try to use one for the first time, that's when it'll do the Docker pull. And you'll see it happen down in the console area. And that's fine. That's the way most people normally do it. I didn't want us to have to wait for those downloads during class today. So I wanted you to go ahead and have them pre-downloaded, okay? So that's what's going on there. And so we can go through, let's just see, I want to grab one of the others that I know is still there. So like the Ubuntu, for example. So in this case, we're going to go get a guest. Most of you, I have it, so I won't totally complete it. But you come down here to this and Ubuntu Docker guest. Once again, it's a Docker image. That's the one that is the Docker pull Gns3/Ubuntu. I know there was a few issues with that. That is still what they officially say in their Docker hub. We'll take a look at that later. So I know some people were having the Xenon, put on the end of it, and that worked, and I'm glad that did for you. It may be a difference by which operating system. Once again, you click, you tell it you're going to install it in the VM, and it's going to show up very quickly on our side. And of course, I already had it, so I'm just going to cancel out because I don't need a second one. But then, so now we've got a switch, a router, a Docker container, all kinds of stuff. And we can keep going through here and adding more and more of these things, as many as we want. And so a couple more that I want to show is I actually had you download a couple that I provide. And particularly one of them is my version of Docker, a Metasploitable image in Docker, which is amazingly enough reached over 100,000 downloads on Docker Hub. So I'm figuring this class will kick it along a little bit further. Now, in this case, this is the difference though. I'm sorry, I should back up. This one, since it's not in the Gns3 store, it's not in their database, you're not going to be able to find that on the list. You have to do what's called a manual template. And this is good to know because pretty much anything you find in Docker Hub, any Docker container can be basically pulled into Gns3. And so that's actually, to be honest, why I got into Docker a number of years ago, was to build particular appliances and nodes to help teach cybersecurity. Because while there's a lot of great stuff in the Gns3 store, all the basics, routers, switches, endpoints, etc., there weren't a lot of things like, IDS or monitoring or, things like that. I wanted to be able to run vulnerability scans and do things. So I built a number of Docker containers that all were focused on, and they'll run in Docker. If you just want to, if you like Docker, you can use them there too. A lot of people do. There's a few guides out there using some of my images, but I built them to run inside of Gns3. So this is what's a little different. You have to come in and say, okay, what am I creating? I'm creating my own template. And so what this does at that point, you have to come into, it brings you to your preferences. What's going on here? Well, you have to come down here to Docker containers at the very bottom, and you'll see that we have a couple listed, our Open vSwitch and the Docker guest that we've imported in here. And so what we're going to do is click New, which will let us make a new template. Now we're still getting the same question. Yes, we're going to run it in the Gns3 VM. So that's cool. We're going to click Next. And then we have a choice where it says we can either use an existing image, something we've already downloaded to make one, or we can use a new image. And if that new image, so for example, if you were just looking on Docker Hub, you found some really cool container that you wanted to bring in and try out in Gns3, then you just have to put the pull path in. Now in our case, I did it, so you can actually look and it should be on your list because you downloaded it with that Docker pull. Otherwise, you'd have to just type it in manually. So if you did the pre-pulls with the command prompt the Docker pulls, then they'll be on this list. If not, then you can just type in that Docker pull path into it manually. So I have a few more than I have you download, but see, there is that Ubuntu Xenial. Most of them have the latest. For some reason, that one is wanting that tag instead of it being the latest. But in our case, what we're going to do is pick the Metasploitable 2 from T. Lee McJr. That's my handle. And then at that point, you can give it a name. I like to clean it up and just call it Metasploitable. It doesn't need to, have my initials in there. And at that point, now the choice, this is about adapters. Most of the time, you're probably just going to leave one adapter. But as I'll show you in a minute, if you're installing an intrusion detection and you would like to put it in line, you may have to add a second router. I usually use it as more of a passive mode, but anyway, we'll talk about some of that stuff. So I'm just going to leave it alone as one for this one, for Metasploitable. It's just going to be a target for us anyway, right? And then I don't have any start commands. I've never had to put anything in that. And then the console is always Telnet unless it is a GUI appliance, and then it will be VNC. And so at that point, if there was any reason to have some kind of environment, you could, maybe a Docker container out there might advise you to do that. You could enter that here. None of mine do, and none of the default Gns3 ones do. So at that point, it becomes another one of these cases that now we have the ability, we've added another container here. And then we can, at that point, we tell it to apply, and it'll put it over there on our left side. So that's the difference. Most of the containers, you can use that new template and just go through the Gns3, follow the wizard. It's real easy. But if you're doing custom Docker stuff, either that you built or you're pulling from somebody else's Docker hub, then you're going to have to come into basically your preferences, come down here to Docker containers and just manually do it. We're going to do one more just real quickly here. So if we do, please mute yourself again if somebody's got their mute off. So I'm going to, they got it. Good. Thank you. I was looking. I was searching on the grid, trying to see if I could find who that was. All right, cool. So we're going to do the same thing. So I'm telling it, in this case, once again, since I did pre-download it, I can use one of the existing images. And the one we want this time is the DarkStat Snort. This is one that I built to put some monitoring and intrusion detection into Gns3. There are plenty of others, of course. Once again, name it how you want. I'm going to have to go looking back in the grid view, aren't I? I'm going to take out the one that's just my naming. So DarkStat, I guess I'm kind of anal, so we'll go with it that way. I'll leave it one adapter, start command, just all the defaults. And then boom, once I apply it, it's going to show up on my list over there. Okay, let me. I got it, I think.
Tiene que ser como creo que era herencia.
Oh, I don't have the power anymore. Ron, if you could get that one for me, I'd appreciate it. There we go. Thank you so much. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So as you can see, we have multiple ways. We can just use this template, new template button here and work through and adding any that we want to. We can also go through the manual approach, which is really just edit preferences, Docker containers, and that will allow us to continue to add as well. And you can see we're starting to build up a pretty good list. We got a client over here. We have a router. We have another, that's one of the defaults. We have a few switches. We have a target. We have a monitoring tool, etc. I guess the only other one I'm going to get real quick is I'm going to go ahead, and this will be coming from Gns3. This is one of their default ones. Is going to be in the guest category. This is the Kali Linux command line tool. Now you can put full Kalis in here too if you've got enough resources to, you can even run a full GUI Kali VM in here. I prefer to use this because it has a lot of just the basic command line stuff, Nmap, SQL map, Hydra. It's got Metasploit, things like that on it that we can use within our environment. And it's already built in and provided by them. So we once again then click through our, and so now if you've played along, you should have a router, a bunch of, we got some switches, we got various clients, and we are able to you know, we were able to then begin to start thinking about, okay, what are we going to do now? What can we build here? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few different things. The first thing we have to do is, like I said, most of the stuff, and ideally for me, I try to stick with Docker for the most part because they're lighter, right? They're containers. And it's actually my favorite thing about Gns3. For example, and you folks, you know, probably can get this and understand yourself. If you think about, if you make a virtual machine, just you make a Kali VM, or you make a Windows VM, or you make, you know, you download the full Metasploit VM or whatever, you know, that's a full installation. And so you're talking about probably at least a gig file, the smallest kind of VM. Some of the capture the flag VMs are pretty small. But, you know, Kali itself, a full GUI Kali, a full install would be multiple gigs. A Windows VM might be 10 gigs. And so all of a sudden, just a Windows machine, a Kali machine, and a Meta, you've got 10, 15 gigs worth of stuff. And you've only got 3 nodes. You've got no routers, no switches, no nothing. But we can build, and I'll show you this, we're going to build a little network with a couple of switches, a router, and kind of a simulated outside, a simulated DMZ, whatever you want to look at it as. And that whole thing will be give or take a gig. The one I do for our classes here, our cybersecurity technician program here at Coverage 6, I provide our students with a 15-node network, 2 routers, multiple switches, a DMZ, a LAN, an outside, all of it working, all of it set up, IDS, etc. All of this stuff, even more than I'm going to build us today. And we are able to provide that in less than a gig of space. So that's one of the values of Gns3. You can build a 15-node working network in less than a gig. That's pretty impressive, right? So, okay, let's talk about how to take some of these steps. So we're going to start by dragging in our router. And so this is just, that's all it is. You just drag the bad boy in. So, all right, cool. You see when you select it or highlight it, it kind of grays out. When I click off to the side, it's unselected, so you can tell what node you've selected. We only have one that's pretty easy to begin with. You can also double click on the names and change this. So this could be, you know, router 1, you know, it's all up to how your choices, outside router, inside router, LAN router, whatever you want to call stuff, whatever you're trying to build, right? Whatever you're trying to simulate. Now, the router, like I said, itself, if you point to this for a second and just let this thing pop up, you'll see that it has 3 interfaces, ETH0, 1, and 2, so 3 network adapters. That's good. We're going to connect it to some different things in a minute. But down at the bottom, look at that. It says, okay, the default username and password is VYOS, VYOS. Not very secure, but okay, it's there for her. But read the rest. It says, this will first boot off of a CD. So then you have to log in and type install system to install it. Why is this? Well, this is actually a real VM. So if you remember, you downloaded an ISO, that's the live bootable version of VYOS. And then you downloaded that 8 little empty 8G file. That's a blank 8 gig hard drive. So what we're going to basically do is boot this appliance up, and then we're going to install that operating system, that router, onto that hard drive. Now, I'll tell you this, if you don't do this, the router will work because it's a live CD. It'll boot off the thing, give you a login, you could go in and set interfaces and get to work. But when you shut down your project and you reboot the next day, you're going to cry because everything you set up disappeared because you didn't do the install, and thus you can't write back to a CD, right? So you can't save anything. So you need to do this install. If you're going to work with it a lot, I actually recommend you create a project like this. You put a router in, you do the install, and I'll show you that here in just a second. And then you just do a save as, so you have that, you've already done that step. That way in future, you can just open up that project and be able to use it again without having to do the install every time. That's kind of annoying, but it is one of the steps sometimes you have to do if it's a true VM inside of here. So how do we do it? How do we work with this? It's just an icon on my screen. What's that? What are we gonna do with it, Lee? Well, while you have those big buttons up at the top, most of the time I actually work with the right click menu. In Gns3, you can right click on anything and get a context menu. And you'll see there's a lot of choices from start and stop and duplicate and et cetera, et cetera. So we're just going to start it. So when you start it, it fires up. It should go green over here in our node list up in the top right. And then, okay, so all right, so what do we do? Well, we right click again and choose console. That is going to open up, and you'll see that it's beginning to boot up here on my screen. At least I hope it's going to continue to boot up. There we go. All right, good. So, and it should be doing the same for you. Now, when you did it, if you just did a install following these instructions for this class, then you probably have Solar Putty up here. And there's nothing wrong with Solar Putty. It's a good little, SSH telnet client. I don't like the tabbed interface. So I have actually switched back in the edit preferences to just old school Putty. I like to have each connection on its own window so I can alt tab around. You'll see that as we get deeper in here. And so you'll see that we're having to have this thing boot. You can see my VM over here is really busy. I haven't tweaked this VM. I've left it at defaults. If you've got the extra RAM and processors, it's good to crank up the settings. You can go in and assign another core, give it some more RAM. I've kept everything at defaults just so that I basically am following along with what I expect your setups will be. And so this is going to take a little bit to boot up, and then we're going to have to do the install. So what I'm going to do actually, so we don't just sit here and get bored watching the router boot, which is usually one of the slower components. Once it gets running, it gets up, it's fine, but it takes a little while to boot up. So here we go. Well, we got in faster than I thought. Okay. So if that's the case, then if you're getting a KVM, I see that somebody's getting a KVM accelerate, error. That was what we were talking about at the beginning. And so you basically are going to have to, backtrack later and go back, shut down your VM, and go in and make sure that you're either in your BIOS, which you can't do now, or you have to leave the class because you have to reboot, right? You make sure that your virtualization settings, Intel, the VTX, and all that. When I get to it here, I'll do this for you guys. I usually do this. Sorry, let me change the font a little bigger in Putty here, so we have a little bit better readability. Is that better? That should be better, right? Hopefully that's better. So if you're getting the KVM error, that is a problem, and I'll try to help some of you folks later if you can't sort that out on your own. Like I said, drop me an email, send me screenshots. You're welcome. And oh, well, hi, Terry. Terry is a student of mine, one of our graduates from the Covered 6 program. Good to see you, hon. So anyway, well, that's why there's a way to do it in Putty, Super Putty, or Solar Putty but like I said, I'm not a fan of it. Just in case if you folks want to, I'll show you this real fast. It is useful to know. If you don't like Solar Putty and you would prefer to go with the old school Putty, you go to Edit Preferences, and then right on the main tab, you come over here 2 little tabs over to Console Applications, and you'll see yours is saying Solar Putty or whatever. So you click Edit, and then you can drop down this drop down and change it from Solar Putty to standalone normal Putty. That's a choice. There's no right or wrong in that. That's up to you. If you prefer the tabbed model of the other Putty, then that's cool. I don't. I prefer to have individual, because I'm a big fan of alt tabbing. And once you get multiple nodes going and you've opened up multiple sessions into multiple nodes and you're doing things, it's kind of a pain to kind of click the tabs as opposed to just alt tab between one terminal session to another. Well, since it booted up so fast, and I see many of you others have gotten it too, for those that are playing along, we'll go ahead and get the install started. It's not too bad, but we'll let that run while we work on some other stuff. So we log in, as it says, with the default VYOS credentials. Not very secure, but it'll get us in. And then once it gets in, all we have to do is just say install system or install image. That's it. And then it's going to come up and say, would you like to continue? It's going to install to the local hard drive. Now, I'll tell you this, some of my students have kind of freaked out in the past about this, and they've said, because it'll ask, when you say yes, it's going to say, it's going to destroy this data. Are you sure you want to do that? Like right here. Or you want to partition? It's going to destroy everything, blah. But it's not your hard drive. It's the virtual hard drive in the VM, right? So you don't have to worry. That's what we're doing. We're installing inside of there. And it supports, secure CRT and other ones too. So cool. I'm just going to let the auto partition happen. So I'm going to leave that default alone. SDA is our first drive that the only drive you can see. It's the 8 gig drive, like we said. That's one way it's not your drive, right? It's one of the drives in the system. And so it says, this will destroy everything. Yes, we want to do that. And then it's gonna, it says, you know, you want to do the partition. I just once again leave the defaults. It goes and starts doing its thing. And it's basically just doing a little install like, you know, anything else you might have done. My router is stuck at the screen. 1, 2, 3, interesting. That one's kind of wild. The router is stuck at 1, because that's actually an IP that it shouldn't have. So that's I'm almost thinking that it's possible in that case, Old Red Fox, that you maybe have using the Ubuntu VM for the client. Well, within here, the router doesn't have any IPs initially. Your Gns3 VM should. So that's one I'm going to have to defer a little bit to. Like I said, I'm going to definitely spend some time this weekend probably answering a lot of emails, helping people with this, and I'm looking forward to doing so. So we'll try to get you fixed. As you can see, this is moving fairly quickly. And once you get it installed, then you're going to, yeah, please do. If you, like I said, send me emails to that account, send me screenshots. I'll answer back. Heck, to be honest, at some point over the weekend, once I'm back in my hotel room, I'll bring up Zoom, and we can, some of you guys, if you want, we can come back and we'll meet together. I'm happy to do that. So then the last question it's asking is, where do you want it to put the boot config file for this system? Once again, just enter for default. And basically, it then asks you to enter a password. Well, I'm just going to stick with ViewIOS for ease, so I know what it is every time. But, you know, that wouldn't be good for a production environment, obviously. We're going to load grub, and it's going to set up the bootloader. So basically, you're setting up a little Linux install with this dedicated I got asked a question about, could we do a full AD lab in here? Technically, yes. But I'm going to tell you my experience, unless you got a ton of RAM and a bunch of cores, it's hard to run Windows VMs inside of here and make it work with everything. It's doable. It can be done. But I try to avoid overtaxing. Maybe it's because I'm always trying to make them so small. But yes, you can definitely do that. One of the things that we're not going to have time to fully go through tonight, but I will talk about here at the end, is you can actually include an actual VM. Not only the stuff that's in here, like the mini VMs and the routers and stuff like that, but you can build a full like Windows VM, or you can build a full whatever, and then you can use that. And yes, you can install Gns3 on Kali. One of my students has done that. They decided to go full out Kali, and they could still get VirtualBox and Gns3. And the username and pass for the ViewIOS is ViewIOS. Okay. So now, once you've done the installation, what you need to do is actually shut down this router, close, you can log off, but I just kill it. And then you right click and tell it to stop, which will shut down the router. Give it a moment, it's a small little mini computer, so we'll give it a moment, and then we'll right click and we'll boot it back up. And then once that does, we'll right click and choose console. And you're gonna notice that it's gonna be, oh, what the heck? Okay, something didn't work, because now it's trying to tell me I have to boot off. That's interesting. So I'm having a little fun here. That's cool. Hopefully yours is installed. It should be installing and then booting off the CD. You should see a grub menu. That's interesting. Well, peachy. Thankfully, worst case, we can still make everything work tonight, even if that's not installing, because like I said, this is a live CD image. That's a new one to me. We will fix that. I've got a couple of the projects I will be willing to share as well that I know have it already running in it. But we'll figure that out. We'll take a look at that. That should have installed. That's an interesting one. I think we'll come back to that. I'm going to leave it alone. Actually, I'm just going to minimize it until it boots back up. And so I'll come back to that. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to sadly troubleshoot every little thing, so I can get to all the topics I want to cover tonight. The install image and install system should technically be the same command. I've used both for years without a problem, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. So we'll take a look at that. I may try the other one just for giggles. I think I did install system. See, I know why you're asking. Good catch, by the way. But if you look, it says install image in these instructions, but when you just point over and it says install system there. So they both technically have worked in the past. Maybe in a bit we'll try the other one, but worst case, we can still work with this temporarily, even if it doesn't have save settings functionality. Yeah, way better. I prefer putty, way better. I agree. And it just makes it so easy when you get a number of things. But some people like the super putty, no shot. So, okay. So while the router's still doing its thing, booting up, or in this case, being a little flaky on me, but that's life. Let's talk about, okay, what else are we going to do? Well, what I'm kind of help us build here is we're going to assume that we have we're going to build like an outside and kind of an inside, if you will. So we're going to need a couple switches. Now, you can use the ones that come with Gns3. They're actually decent little switches. I turned off and switched boot mode to hard D, works fine. Okay, all right, cool. I may be just missing something. It usually does it all by itself, but you can tweak all these things. It is a full VM, so there are ways to mess with all this. Just for a moment, I'm going to drag one of these in because I do want to show you. If you try to use one of the Gns3 switches, the default ones, watch what happens when you drag it into your topology. The first thing it does, this little dialog box comes up asking you, where do you want to run it? What server? You notice in my case, it's basically picking my desktop. I haven't given this new laptop a better name yet, sorry. But as I told you, we always want to put things inside the Gns3 VM. So if we were really going to use this switch, we would make that choice. It's a decent switch. It supports VLANs, but it's really, I'll show it to you real fast. I'm not going to keep it, but this will show you how to do it. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to add that switch. You can see it's a switch here. If I just point to it for a second, it's going to come up and tell me that it is an 8-port switch. You can see Ethernet 0 through 7. So it's just a basic unmanaged, dumb, 8-port switch. If you double click on it, it brings up a screen where you can configure a few things, including VLANs and stuff like that. But that's all that it'll do. So while that's cool enough for a simple little network, it's, yes, they do. Do Cisco Viral images work in here? Yes, they actually do. It's a really cool program, especially if you have some of those resources to throw at it. So if you want it, if you drag something in and you decide you don't want it, you just right click and tell it to delete. And easy enough, you can delete that out. So I don't want to use their switch. Their switch is fine, and feel free to play with it. Just make sure you put it in the Gns3 VM. Okay, cool. So there is a way to fix it. I thought so. All right. Feeling better. We'll get this done. Thanks, guys. So, but I like this one, the one I had you bring in, Open vSwitch. The reason I like Open vSwitch is that Open vSwitch is a full, sort of like the router. It's a Linux distribution built to be a switch, and it has functionality. It's got its own functionality. So to be honest, I'm not going to go into great depth of how to configure it today, but you can do things like VLANs. You can do things like, one of my favorite things is you can set up port mirroring on it, which is really cool when you want to be able to, for example, do intrusion detection, do some passive capturing of stuff on the network. I'm going to just, keep this pretty simple today, but it's a really nice switch. And they have a decent set of instructions over at their site for the Open vSwitch. And it's another one like VYOS that you can spin up in the cloud. Once again, how many people have ever put it on metal? Probably not many, but it's a cloud resource for sure. So I'm going to drag 2 of them in, one on either side, basically. And then I'm going to do a little renaming because I'm just that kind of guy. So we're going to rename this as they don't like you to have spaces, so unfortunately. So I'm just going to say outside, stop it, switch. And then I'm going to do the same thing and change this up a little bit. And we'll call this, what the heck, DMZ switch. We'll pretend this is going to be a DMZ. So we got ourselves a couple switches. Well, we need to connect these things together in some form or fashion. So we do have this last button. Like I said, I really only use these 2 on the bottom, on the left here, the bottom 2. The last button is a toggle switch to add a link. Now, this is one thing that I admit, Cisco's Packet Tracer does a way better job of this because you can pick what kind of line, all kinds of stuff. In this case, you're just running a cable. It keeps it pretty simple in Gns3, but it still is powerful. And so it just becomes a matter of, you get this little crosshair pointer, you see the plus sign I have now. And so you just point to one of your appliances and you click once and it gives you a choice. And you can see this is another reason I like the OpenV switch. It's a 16 port switch. So you got a lot more things you can build on well, thank you already, Johnny. I see a compliment. I appreciate that. So in this case, we're going to just pick Ethos 0, and then you see we got a cable, so we can drag this cable around. So we're going to come over here and click on our router and stick it into Ethos 0, and now we've connected our router to our switch. Well, let's do the other one. So we're going to come over here, Ethos 0, got ourselves a cable, come over here to the router, we'll put it in Ethos 1, boom. And it's just a toggle, so you turn it off when you're done. So of course, right now the switches aren't on, so they're showing red, but the router is, so those connections are showing green. We even get simulated link lights here. It's kind of cool, right? So at that point, of course, we would want to turn on our router, so we can do that. Let's fire those bad boys up. Just right click and choose start. You can use the big start and stop, but at the one at the top, but that starts and stops everything in the project. Just be aware of that. So I like to kind of manage it better. And sometimes if you build a really big topology and you don't have a lot of resources on your machine, you may have to only start up a certain piece of it at any given time, right? And so you don't need 100 appliances all running. You're just going to work and test in a certain area. So you don't necessarily need to. We're not going to get that elaborate, but I expect some of you will build some pretty elaborate ones over the coming weeks and months ahead. How do you do that? I'm like, okay, cool. So how do we do the cabling? The cabling is just turning on the cable mode. You click on, pick the port you want to plug into, and then you drag the cable around. And technically I wouldn't be smart to plug a switch into a switch, so I'm not going to. I'm going to hit escape and cancel out of that. But that's all it is. As long as you're in that mode, then you could pick another port and drag to some other item. Once again, I'm going to cancel. The starting, just if that was the question, these three up here at the top, the red, the green start, the pause, and the stop, you see it says start or stop all nodes. Whereas if you right click and choose, you can start or stop an individual node, okay? So that's the difference there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it looks a lot like packet tracers. As a matter of fact, they are very, very similar. Like I said at the beginning though, the big difference is packet tracer truly is a simulator. So if you go into the packet, if you go into some Cisco router manual and you pick some esoteric command and you type it in the packet tracer, and it's not going to work because they didn't program the if-then for that. But if you were running that same router inside of Gns3, every command would work because you're running a VM of it. You're running a full emulation. So, okay, so we've got some routers and some switches. So what else? Well, we're going to need some clients. So what I'm going to do is just, we're going to start with a couple easy ones. We're going to drag in one of these Ubuntu Docker guest and just stick it out here on the outside. Let's see. Well, I see what you're saying. And you can build anyway. All I'm doing is I'm kind of cheating in a sense here. I'm just going to make this a simple and connect sort of a simulated outside to a simulated inside or a simulated DMZ. I'll show you another topology at the end that's a little more elaborate to kind of give you an idea of where you can go with this. So yeah, every feature, if you have the licensing for Cisco and you put the Cisco firmware in here, you're running a Cisco router in here and it'll do everything the Cisco router does at your desk or at in your server rack or whatever. It's actually one of the cool features. I've worked with it before, but we don't have the licensing here, so we use open source stuff. But if you have the Cisco licensing at a Cisco shop or you bought that, the VERL files, they will run in here as well. The other thing about the difference between Gns3 and packet tracer is a simulation. Gns3 full emulation, full VMs, and packet tracer, of course, is Cisco all day, every day. If you're dragging a switch in, it's going to be a Cisco switch. But here you can drag in any switch. You could drag, get other brands. There's a ton of them in the store. I'll show you that at the end. Okay. So yeah, really cool stuff. So I've dragged in a guest. I'm just going to call this, just a Ubuntu guest, Ubuntu Client, or client, something smaller. I don't like the numbering they do. And I'm going to drag in one of these virtual PCs that comes stock. Now, once again, it's going to ask me, where do I want to run it? Or what's the question? Always the Gns3 VM. If your computer is named lower than G, it'll default to Gns3 VM. But since mine's desktop, it's defaulting to desktop. So always pay attention when those dialog boxes pop up. Because if you don't put it in the VM, then it can't talk to the other stuff that's in the VM. Kind of defeats the purpose, right? So PC1 in this case is fine. So what I'm going to do is show you, we got to obviously wire these guys up. And so I'm going to plug them just into the switch. Like I said, yes, I'm cheating a bit. The topology is probably not the best layout, but you'll get the idea in a second. I'm just building something to get us the basics here, right? That's probably going to be a cool one too. Yeah, exactly. So we've connected in our stuff. And then of course we probably would want, and there's other things you can add. In our case, the only thing I'm going to pretend is in our DMZ. So I'm going to stick in a Metasploitable. That, you know, would probably, it's a web server, right? So it happens to be a highly vulnerable one, which we can play with. So I'm going to just plug it into the switch and plug it in. You see, once again, just connecting all these things. Now, I haven't turned any of these on yet because we need to assign some IP addresses, and we need to kind of come up with a network if we're going to kind of play with this, right? And you can do anything you want. That's the beauty of this, is that you're in charge. Now, I'll say this. There are two ways always, basically, in Gns3 to assign for most of these appliances an IP. You can boot the darn thing up and go in and do it at the command prompt, or do it, you know, by, you know, modifying Etsy network interfaces, and it'll work. It'll remember those things. But because Gns3 knows one of the biggest things you're going to do is set up networking, you're building virtual networks, they have actually added a really cool feature, which is you right-click on one of these clients, and you go to Configure, and then down here at the bottom, you'll see Network Configuration and the big Edit button, okay? So when you click on that, look what it brings up. That is Etsy network interfaces. You're actually given like a notepad way to edit the Etsy network interface file that's in that Ubuntu guest. So we don't have any DHCP, so I'm going to have to go with static configuration here for the moment. So I'm going to, you know, just take out these comments. I'm not going to worry about name service at the moment. You can put name service in here. I'm going to keep this at an IP level only. And we could leave it at this, but I'm be honest, I'm going to go with the mechanism I always use. Many times when I build these networks, it's pretty consistent for me actually. I generally decide and use the kind of model that the entire internet is the 10xxx. That's of course the private non-routable class A block of IPs in IP4. And so I just pretend that that's the whole internet, and then I decide certain numbers are outside and whatever else is inside. So I like using that, so I'm going to continue my theme here. So we're going to say that this machine is out here on the outside, and I'm just going to give it an IP of 10.1.1.100. So I'm going to pretend the outside is 10.1.1 whatever at the moment. And then, of course, I'm going to have to set up leave the subnet mask alone. And then I'm going to basically say 10.1.1.1, just using the kind of standard. Now, that'll be the router's interface when I go configure that in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And that's going to save that. I'm going to apply it. And if you want to, you can click again and see that it's saved. Everything's working. We could have done this with VI or Nano inside at the command prompt, but Gns3 has given us this little shortcut so we can edit it before we boot it up. And then we can do the same thing to Metasploitable. We can say configure it, click on the network configuration edit button down here, same deal. Now we're back changing this file and just taking out the comments real fast. And then just because I like it, it's an easy number to work with, I'm going to pretend that our DMZ, what IPs we were given was 10 range. So I'm going to set it up like this. 10, 10, 10, 1. We'll have to configure the router, but that's okay. I'm going to work through this. Save that one and apply. Now, you can technically, this is one of the only ones you can't do that on. This little router, this little virtual PC has its own interface. So you just have to fire it up. So I'll show you. We're just going to start that one up. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose a console, of course. And they come up super fast. All these Docker appliances boot like that for the most part. And so, here we are being able to get to the command prompt. You'll see that it says, just type in a question to get help. And you'll see that it has basically just some real basic functionality for network testing. It's got ARP, it's got DHCP, or we can give it an IP, we can ping, and we can, you know, stuff like that. We can show various information. So what we want to do is give it an IP. Now remember, we're pretending that everything out here is 10.1.1 something. So I'm just going to give it a 10.1.1 200. I gave the other one 100, so I'll give this one a 200. It's going to look for duplicate addresses, which it's not going to find. It's going to apply that, and there we go. So I'm going to leave this here, and I'll change the font size in a minute too. Sorry, folks. I'm going to go ahead and boot up the Ubuntu client, of course, and then bring up a console on it. And let me change these settings, get a little bit better readability here. So that's our Ubuntu client now. And if I bring back up the PC one, I'll do the same thing real quick for us. Now, what we've done, of course, is we basically at this moment actually already have a small working network. And how can I prove that? Well, I can ping from 10.1 200. I can ping from what is 100, the Ubuntu client, over to the other client, right? So that's working because these two machines are plugged into a switch, right? This part is working. We've just verified that. Hopefully you can do that too, right? And we can go the opposite way. We can ping this way. We can ping back from this one, right? Pretty basic stuff, right? But we should be able to see the pinging going on, right? Yay, it's working, cool. All right, cool. Now you'll see this one pretends to be kind of more like a window, even though it's really Linux, but it pretends to be kind of a PC, so it only pings so often, whereas on Linux, it'll keep pinging until you hit Control-C, of course. But of course, if I try to ping that 10.10.10 metasploitable, no luck, of course. But that makes sense. We should all know. We know that, right? We have a router over here that is not configured. So there's nothing in between. And plus, I don't even have it on, but okay, let's turn it on. And that won't matter because we still have a router that's not configured. So we're getting, you know, destination net unreachable. All those packets are dying because this router is not set up right. So we're gonna have to do at least a little basic configuration on this router. How much RAM do I have? 16 gigs on this machine. Actually, no, this one's only 12. My main machine is 16, sorry. And like I said, I haven't changed any of the defaults. I'm sorry if I'm going a little too fast. I'm feeling like we're running late, but I'm appreciating many of you sticking around. If I'm causing you to miss something, then obviously jump on into your next session. But if you want to stay, we'll stay a little longer where I can hit the last few things and try to wrap up. So what do we got to do? Well, we've got to do at least some basic configuration of this router. If we had more than one router, we'd have to set up like RIP or whatever, which you can do. But in our case, since we just have, you know, any router that has, you know, the interfaces, as long as we set these interfaces, then the router will be able to, you know, propagate that traffic for us. So I'm not, once again, intending to make this a BYOS class, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a console. Now you'll notice that, oh, hold it, I already had one open, that's why. Let me kill that one. But sometimes if you bring up one of these and it just seems like it's black, just hit the enter key and usually the prompt will come up. But yeah, I already had a router one, didn't I? Yeah, okay, cool. So now admittedly, since I don't want to take the time to do it, I know that people have fixed that. We got to have it boot off the hard drive. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna do this off of the live CD to show you how to do this. So I'm gonna log in as BYOS. In BYOS, I left my password that way when I reset it up. Now this router, and I'm, like I said, not meaning to make a big, there is a whole bunch of documentation at the BYOS site. You can find all this and figure out on your own, but it's very much Cisco-like. If you know Cisco, there's two modes. There's kind of an operational mode. So like we can do things like show interfaces, and it's gonna tell us we got all these interfaces, but of course none of them are set up, no IPs yet. And we could look at other things, ARP tables, all kinds of stuff. BYOS has tab completion on steroids. So if you don't know what you can do, you can type tab, and it'll show you all the things you can do. So you can look at DHCP, you can look at the IP, you can look at interfaces, just on and on. And this is like being in that, you know, just outside mode of the Cisco. And then of course in Cisco, you have to go into enable mode, right? To actually edit anything. Well, in this one, you have to go into configure. So same kind of model. So when you type configure, it actually puts you into the configuration mode. And you'll see your prompt changes from a $ to a hashtag or £. So we're in this configure mode. Obviously, we didn't have to type another password, but that's something that would be set on a live router. And so the ability to set this up, and we're in the mode now, we can make changes. So there's a whole bunch of things we could do, but just to get us going here and can connect our two sides of our network, our two individual switch networks, and make them a network with a router, we have to assign IPs and set up the IPs for our interfaces, right? So remember, we're using 10.1.1x out here on the outside and 10.10.10x on the inside. So we're gonna need a 10.1.1.1 as the gateway for the outside and 10.10.10.1 as a gateway for the inside. And so what we can do is we're gonna have to set the interfaces. In VYOS, you need two commands to do that. The first one is a set interfaces command. And if you tab, it generally will auto-complete this. So then we're gonna do Ethernet, and then we're gonna do the ETH0, because we're gonna set the first one, right? So we're setting the interfaces, Ethernet, ETH0, and then we're gonna give it an address. Oops, type rightly. There we go, address. And then all we do with single quotes is just give it the IP we wanna give it. That is how you set an interface. Now there's two commands though, because you also have to, ooh, what happened? Oh, I know what I did wrong. I didn't, well, you should know. I didn't give it a /24. I knew I was forgetting something. Got to give it a range. What segment is it on? There we go. So it took that now. Now there is another, you have to give a description to each interface. And this is used later for things like DHCP and firewall rules so that we can match up. But it's actually fairly easy. You just have to up arrow, change out your address part. And this is one thing nice about VYS. A lot of their commands are very repetitive. So you can use that up arrow of Linux to be able to repeat. And then we just change it to description. And then you can call it whatever. In our case, we're going to call it outside. So this is now configured the one interface, 10.1.1.1 on the outside. And so, you know, we're going to save ourselves some work here, right? I'm going to hit the up arrow a couple times. I'm just going to edit this with using the arrow keys. So I'm going to change this to ETH1. I'm going to change these to 10 and 10. You see what I'm doing there? Just quick and easy. Yeah, it's kind of like Cisco, very much. And as a matter of fact, these guys pretty much clone Cisco. I think about as much as they can do without getting sued, to be honest. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to change the description. And this is one thing that's nice. Of course, you Linux folks know this, but if you're newer to Linux, you're going to get a lot of Linux because almost all this stuff is Linux, obviously. Linux all day. So I'm just with a few, you know, very quickly, I'm able to change that, right? So now I've issued the command to set 10.1.1.1 as the outside and 10.10.10.1 as the DMZ. And so at that point, I want to save. Oh, well, commit. Committing will make the change happen. I should have done that first, sorry. And then you can actually go test. And if you don't like it, you can revert. And of course, if you like it, which I'm fine with this, I'm going to go ahead and save. So it saves so that every time we boot up. Now, in my case, it's not going to work because I'm not booting off the hard drive. So I'll have to fix that later. But anyway, you guys get my point. And so at that point, then if I type exit to get out of the configuration mode and go back to just the operations mode, I can use show interfaces again. And all of a sudden now we're going to have IPs, right? Okay, kind of cool. So now if I come over here to say my Ubuntu guest that's out here on the outside, if I ping 10.1.1.1, I get an IP. And then of course, better yet, if I ping 10.10.10, we now have a network here, right? Starting off pretty cool. So we have the ability to cross this network. Now we can do so many things, and you know, in the interest of time and some of the things I want to do, I'm going to you know, not go fully into every one of these. Like I said, you can get a command prompt on these switches, and they have a command prompt. They have their own language. You can look up OpenV switch, and it has its own ability. Out of the box, it's just a 16-port switch, and you can do anything you want to with it. But if you go in and configure it, you can set VLANs, you can do port mirroring, you know, just everything you can do. It's a fully featured switch. So, and that's can be really cool. And in most of the topologies I build, I end up setting up the port mirroring so that I can then, set in an intrusion detection device like the snort in there and stick it on and, have that passive port feeding all that data. So, but one of the things, like I said, I only got so much time. I'm going to take a little time. We're going to run long here because we started late. But anyway, to give everybody a little idea of some of the other cool things that you can do in Gns3, and it's probably one of my favorite features, folks, is that Gns3 is cool. The Gns3 is totally integrated with Wireshark. So it's one of my favorite things because a lot of times, especially if people are learning new, like our students, and they're trying to get down the OSI model, you want to show or you want to see, demo some cool things, then you can do this. So you can notice how we've been right-clicking on all these nodes, but if you pay attention, as I slowly go over this wire, you see how it changes to red? And if I right-click on that, it brings up its own little shortcut menu, including delete the link if you needed to get rid of one. But you'll see the start capture. God, I love this. This is actually one of my favorite things. And it says start the visualization program should be checked. And you can name it. This is another reason why you want to name your nodes well, because then when you do a PCAP, a packet capture, it'll name it appropriately. And so I'm going to start this up because it's one of my favorite things to show. So this is Wireshark that I expect many of you know and love. Of course, this is a very quiet network. It's not doing much right now. So we, are not seeing much. But if I go back over here and just say, let me move this out the way. If we just repeat that ping, then all of a sudden, boom, we start getting traffic, right? Now, we missed the ARP because, well, there's an ARP. There we go. So we see an ARP going on here. Where they're basically, who in the hell is this IP, and communicating MAC addresses back and forth. We can see the ICMP traffic here. I use it a lot in classes to show things like, some of you probably know and maybe some of you don't, but if you use FTP, right, to log into a machine, then that's clear text. You can see that with Wireshark. Use it as part of attacks, being able to capture a cookie so I can say break in the damn vulnerable or whatever the case may be. And all of this can be done inside of, the Gns3 environment. And so Wireshark is fully integrated, and you can save these PCAPs and view them later. But it's really nice because unless you're making things happen, not a lot, like on your home network or your office network, if you start capturing, you may get a lot of stuff that's kind of superfluous. And in this case, in this environment, you can just watch how things work, how things, it installed Wireshark itself. It comes with PuTTY and SolarPuTTY and Wireshark and all these things. If you already had them, that's fine. I always have PuTTY on my machine, so then there's another copy in the Gns3 folder that, but that's all good. So like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it is a feature of Gns3 built right in here to support Wireshark. And so then I can come back, right click, tell it to stop the capture, and we can turn that feature off. So there's just so many cool things you can do with Gns3. And of course, with even more time, I'm going to try to get onto a few other topics, but, with even more time, you can set up things, you can build yourself a range that, something I've even done occasionally, say on an engagement, like a red team engagement, you've got a target and a lot about them, but you don't want to necessarily give yourself away too early. You can build a variant and try things within here to test things before you go out against that target. There are ways to take Gns3 and literally connect it to a real network. And I've seen companies do that where they say, I want to test out some new piece of equipment. I want to test out some new intrusion detection maybe or whatever. And if you can get it as a trial or you can get it from a vendor and get it inside of Gns3, then you can absolutely connect in and you can run traffic through your real network through here and run a simulation. And one of the cooler things I did a couple years ago for the SpiceWorks Spice World conference that I was doing some presentations with CompTIA, we were doing they wanted me to do some cybersecurity blue team kind of demos, monitoring and stuff like that. And so one of the things I did was some of you may be familiar with this product, OSSIM, Alien Vault's open source SIM product, right? And so what I did was I pulled down a copy of that as a VM, and I literally set it up just running in VirtualBox or whatever. But then what I was able to do was literally bring it in here. And I won't do this today. We don't have that much time, but I want to show you this. You can come in here. So we have, like VYOS is a QEMU VM, but we could put VirtualBox or VMware VMs in here. And then they'll show up, and then they become items that you can drag and put, and you're actually installing an instance of that VM inside of Gns3. So between the fact that you can custom build Docker components or pull down anything out there from Docker to put in here, there's all the stuff that's built in. On top of that, if there's something you still can't get in, just build a VM of it and bring it in here and integrate it into your environments. So that the power of this to be able to build a network, all we've done with this router so far is put some IPs so it works, but we could go in and put firewall rules, right? And now you got to get past that, where we can, stick ourselves like a dark stat snort in here. There we go, which is just a Docker container I built that has both dark stat and snort on here. I'm not going to fully fire it up. I can fire it up in a second, but I'm not going to do the mirroring. But in principle, I would just, and actually I shouldn't have done that. Let me delete that. I probably would really do something like this, which is plug it into the last port, right? And then I would say, okay, inside of the Open vSwitch, I would set up the mirroring so that the first 15 ports were all mirrored over to port 16. And then I can just fire up snort on there and tell it to monitor that interface. And all of a sudden I got a running intrusion detection system inside of my topology. See if you can get past that, right? So as you can see, you can build a pretty elaborate, very holistic network. And I promise you, like this little one here, this might only be not even a half a gig. And the biggest thing is going to be that BYOS router in there. The others are all Docker containers. They're very small. And so you could export this project out, share it with a friend, and you could set up honeypot, anything. If it's something that you can run on Linux particularly, you could build a Docker container for it. That's what I did. I have built a number of Docker containers, the Metasploitable, I've got Damn Vulnerable, I've got that Snort appliance, I've got one that I call the Net Defense appliance. It has OpenVAS and a bunch of other stuff on there. A bunch of others. I'll show you this here in a little bit. So you too can actually pull some of that stuff down if you'd like to and add it into your topologies and for building and learning, right? So let me see what else, make sure I'm checking my notes here. Okay, and answering all the questions I can. See what I got here. Yes, I'm going to share it all with you folks. It's all public. And I'll put some of it in that doc too as we go on. So let me point out a few last things here inside of Gns3 before I get to some of those additional resources and stuff, okay? So one of the big things, and this is a biggie, is that when you come up here to the file menu, you should note the distinct lack of a save button. There's an open, there's a new, there's a save as, but there's no save. This is really important for you to think about and understand inside of Gns3. In other words, every time I'm making a change, every time I'm dragging something in here, every time I'm deleting something, it's instantly saving. Think of it like the way a database does, right? As soon as you make a change, it saves, okay? So yes, you could set up I actually got Graylog to running, but it's just too much for one of my class topologies, so I abandoned that. Autosave in real time, yes, it's really cool. Now, what this means though, if for example, you're wanting to build another copy, then you got to do a save as. Like if we've built this, then we have to do a save as, because if we make any changes, we're changing this. So if we want to leave sort of our baseline copy, we want to do a save as off of that, right? And then we can change in the other copy. If you ever build one of these and you want to share it with a buddy, share it with somebody else, put it out there as a challenge or whatever, then you can do the feature that's called Export Portable Project. And that will take everything and write it out to a .gns3 project file. And this could be anywhere from tens or hundreds of K to gigabyte in size or bigger. And you can then take that one monolithic file and send it to somebody, and they can import it in, and it'll import all the stuff that is the project in question. And of course, then you would use the import portable project. So like I said, there is no save. Yeah, there is the downside. It's a good point, Johnny. I mean, this is actually why I use it in this capacity, is that this is a great learning tool, right? If you don't know how to set up some of these things, then you got to do a little research to figure out how to set it up, right? And so you're able to, it forces you, it gives you a reason, it gives you an incentive to get in there. I want to build one of these things. I want to know how to do that. And then you're learning routers, you're learning switches, you're learning things that you might not have played with before. And of course, you know, the big thing is, like, we do some of this in our program, especially some of our more advanced classes, where we'll have, you know, like maybe a group build something and then they'll swap and each other attack each other's stuff. Maybe you can do that with some of your friends, right? Build something, give it to them, they build you one, you try to play with it, create each other challenges. There's just so many things you can do with this thing. So I'm trying to think, what else? Let me double check my notes one more time. Talked about that. Okay. So, but all of these, yeah, these are all, now, okay, there is one sort of tricks and traps. There's a couple little tips and traps. The one thing about the Docker appliances, it's the one little limitation. The Docker appliances only usually have maybe one, maybe two places that are what's called persistent. So in other words, if you make changes in some other folder, then it may not save, because that's not persistent. They're containers. They're just supposed to come up and do certain tasks. Now, the way Gns3 works is it always makes it so that etc network is persistent, okay? So you can almost guarantee that if it's a Linux container inside of Gns3, it's gonna have etc network persistent, so that the interfaces file can be persistent, right? So, so like what you'll find if you need to create one yourself, like that darkstat snort one there, I had to actually make not only etc network persistent, but etc snort, because if not, then I can't save the snort config and it won't save those settings. When I built the web server that I built, I actually have persistent web folders. Yeah, and that's true. If you're trying to export this project, then it will force you to make sure everything's shut down, because you can't save it in an active state, right? So it needs to shut down, and then you export it out. People can import it in and boot it back up. But there are some cool kinds of things that you can do. Even one of the things is, like, in one of my classes, I wanted my students to be able to do a Hydra attack. And so the Kali Linux command line from Gns3, this little bad boy, has a Hydra tool on it. But of course, there's no password list. It's not the full Kali. I'm not sure. Ooh, got some kind of error on Gns3. Oh, okay, it's still doing that. They have not fixed that yet. Well, it's kind of similar to the, I see that they need to fix their repo, their Docker Hub a bit. It's saying that Kali version 2 isn't found. So I know what's going on here. I'll show you guys how to fix this. What we have to do is go into edit preferences, go down to our Docker containers, and then what we have to do is edit this one, because it's trying to pull, let's see, where's the tag I'm looking for? Nope, maybe I just got to start it over. Darn it. Okay, I'm going to do it that way. It's pulling B2 because it came from the store, as opposed to just pulling latest. So this is something they still haven't fixed, and I bugged that too. Interesting. I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to just tell it I want to add a new one. And it's sort of like we did with my personal ones. We just tell it we're going to use one of the images that we already have, Kali latest. And at that point, when we go through all the defaults, not changing anything, then I can apply that, and I have Kali, this version of it, which will run. Hey, all right, cool. And so I can, of course, wire this up, stick it on my switch. Let's give it an IP on our network. So let's see, what did we do? We've done 100 and we've done 200. So I guess I'll do like 250, 150. Oops, I'm messing things up. Pay attention, Lee. There we go. No, why is it not going where I want it to? There we go. So I'm going to give this one, this is going to be on our outside again. And of course, you can pick whatever IPs you want as long as they're internally consistent. So I'm going to go with just 150 here. Give it the same gateway out. save that, apply that. And so now I can bring up, start it, and then bring up this Kali Linux. And just for one more time, my last little demo in this piece, and then we'll go show a few other resources to help you really flesh these things out, add some more fun. So we'll apply that. So this has Hydra, the program's there. It has Nmap, it's got, you know, Metasploit, all kinds of cool things, but it doesn't have any password files. So what I did is I was able, there's a way if you actually go into the Gns3 VM, these individual images, it's kind of buried, but they're buried down in the /opt folder, /gns3 /projects /docker /images, and you have to get it. You have to look at whatever number. I don't mean to do that. If you point to one of these nodes like that, it comes up and you see this little weird number, this hexavalue number. Login ID, server ID is D7DO551B, blah, blah, blah. Well, you'll find that buried down under this project in the Docker images folder. And then when you go into that folder, you'll find Etsy network. And so if you, and that's just on the VM, and you can use like SSS, you know, FTP, SSTP to upload into the VM. I was able to actually stick some password files into that Etsy network. And then when I saved the project, when I exported the project, they stayed there. And when I gave them to my students, they had a password file so that they could do that, you know, that command. But, you know, we can do all kinds of things at that point. Once we have Kali, you know, we can do a quick little Nmap of Metasploitable, of course. We don't have any DNS, but you can see it comes up, boom. We know Metasploitable is full of holes. So there's a ton of things we could play with there. And of course, you can build a lot more things. Now, what I'm going to do real fast is I'm going to do a couple things, and then I'm going to show you those other resources, and I think we'll be getting to the end of what we've done here. But I'm going to stop all this for me, and then I'm just going to show you one. This is actually the topology we use at our cybersecurity program here, our intro cybersecurity program at Covered 6. So I'm going to open an existing project just to give you a little bit idea of how much bigger this can get. You'll see we're talking to our local server, we're talking to ourselves, it's loading all that out of the VM. And so here is the node, the project we provide to our students here in our intro class. So you can see we have a web browser in there, the web term client, that's a Gns3 Gui. We have a browser and we can actually surf all the sites in here. We have the Kali Linux, we have the OpenVOS, so we can do vulnerability scans. You can see we've simulated an outside, a DMZ, and a LAN. We have different monitoring, which are those dark stats node appliances. And this, I got a holy shit, but this is teeny. You gotta go to the Gns3 forum and look at some, they have contests every so often where they have people build big ones just to see what all you can do. And it's pretty amazing, some of them are out there. But this file, and I'll show you this because I think you'll find it interesting. If I go to my desktop, my student folder, and I go in here, this is this file. Look at this. 824 megabytes rounding, and that's what they get, 15 nodes of network. Not bad, right? I mean, if you built that as VMs, what would that be? 15, 20 more gigs? And you'd have to run 15, 20 VMs all at the same time. And, you know, I mean, you can do it. You can build some pretty elaborate ranges with a lot of VMs, but to me, it's hard to beat the power of bringing all this in. And then, you know, in this case, for this one, of course, then students are able to, you know, we teach them how to set firewall rules. They, you know, learn about intrusion detection and all kinds of cool stuff. So this is, okay, cool. So what I want to show you then next is, let me do this. I think we're doing okay here. Let me pop back over here. A couple slides. I promise you, it's not a very many slides. It's going to be the smallest slide deck of DEFCON probably. But I want to show you, and like I said, I'll give you all this. And I'll take you to a few of these real fast. So there are a number of resources. Let me find a browser. How about that? So if you go over to Docker Hub and you go to Gns3, they always have a /u. That's the URL that's in that slide deck. Like I said, I'll give you a URL later that you can use. This is theirs. So there's Open vSwitch. These are all the ones that Gns3 themselves have made for distribution. So you can see their pull path is supposedly Gns3 Ubuntu. It's supposedly just Gns3 Kali, but there are a few little issues with theirs. You can see that they get a decent number of downloads, etc. So this is a place where you can go you could pull down some of their Docker images. My handle, both my full name is Travis Lee McWhorter Jr. So T. Lee Mc Jr. is where that comes from. And if you take a look at mine, I've already had you pull down a couple, but you'll see I have the newer DarkStat snort. I have an older snort. I have Elasticsearch. This is the one that has OpenVAS. This is the one that's gone crazy, Metasploitable. I don't know why. Well, it works. I'll be honest. To my knowledge, it's the only Metasploitable that works in Gns3 or Docker. And so there's a bunch of people who've used it to build guides and stuff, whether for Gns3s. There's Damn Vulnerable. There's a LAMP server that has both 80 and 8080 ports open. So I can do firewall lessons and show if we block everything but 80, then the other port goes away, stuff like that. So all of these are, they're in there too. But probably the kind of other thing that's really cool is just you can get there by obviously just this Gns3 Marketplace. They have a ton of stuff. Now we're starting to see more and more stuff pop here that costs money. So be aware of that. But a lot of this is still free. They're selling other stuff too that isn't all just free stuff. But there's all this Cisco. And once again, you got to have the technically the licensing for Cisco. If you come over here to appliances, you can add Windows. There's Ubuntu. Of course, we already saw that. Firefox or WebTerm are pretty much the same thing. Here's the Open vSwitch. Just on and on. Look at all this stuff you can add, and there's more. So many things that you can do. Yeah, so Damn Vulnerable, they have their own, and then I've made a version of it as well. And so you're free to use any of that stuff. The honest to God truth is, if you can find it in Docker Hub, if it's a Docker container, then you can do that manual template and use the pull path, and you can pull just about anything into Gns3. It may not work. There are a few things you kind of have to do in Gns3 sometimes to make it work. I mean, in Docker to make it work in Gns3, you got to kind of think through some of the things and how you design and set it up. If you're into that, that may be a whole nother topic someday, how to build Docker images for Gns3. But nonetheless, but you can build your own Docker. I got into that and built myself a particular VM that I just set Docker up, and I do all of my Docker development there. And then I check those into my hub, and they should be available. And you guys and girls are more than welcome to use them. This is the one I wanted you. I'm going to keep this here for a moment. This is the one. Take a picture, take a screenshot. It's a pretty damn big URL. I'm sorry, but it's Google sharing. But what I've done is I've created a document in the in that lead.defcon 28 folder, and it will it has links to the setup doc, link to the slides, and they're already up there. And then there's also going to be, I'll put this project file just so you have something to play with if you weren't set up today. We get you fixed tomorrow or something, then you can pull that down and import it and at least have the basics done. So the URL is right here on the screen. Let me see. I think I can ultimately put it into, hang on a second. Bear with me. Let me find it. I should be able to put it into here too, because I think I mailed it to myself. Pretty sure I did. Let me see. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can find this. Sorry guys. If I can, I'll put it right into the Slack. I mean Slack. Sorry, that's what we'll use here. Into the Discord. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so that's the setup instructions. Which one is this one? Let's see which one I'm looking for here. Okay, cool. I think this is it. Let me make sure I got the right one. One QB558. That looks right. All right, cool. Hang on. Coming into Discord now. Once I go back to my Discord screen. There you go. That shit looks like I doubled it. Looks like somebody else beat me to it. All right, so we got it in there. Cool. So that should be able to let you get to that. Take a screenshot. You know, if you don't know how to do that, hit print screen and just paste it into Paint so you'll have it. Take a picture with your phone. This is going to be the master link. If you go there right now, it has a link to the setup. If you didn't get those, you can get those. It has a link to these slides with the other links in the slide deck. And then on top of that, it has, it's going to have the project. I'll have to, when we get down here and we finish answering any questions, etc., then what I will do is I will export that project that I just built out and put it up there for you. And I'll put the shared link for that into this document. So this is the really keystone document. You want to keep this link, and then you can get anything in future as we go on. So we pasted it everywhere. So that's my class. A little bit rushed because I didn't want to take too long. And once again, we apologize, everybody. I'm sorry we had the sound and audio, and that sadly we lost some people who, you know, kind of gave up or dropped out of waiting because it wasn't starting. But I really, really appreciate everybody sticking with me and doing this. And please feel free. I'll stick around in Discord for a while. I'll be answering emails later once I get home from my second home here at our C6 studios here in California. But I'll be happy to help and you know, help you folks out and do the best I can. So I really, really appreciate it. I'll hang around for a while. Appreciate all the positives. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned some cool things and that you feel like you could go off and potentially build yourself a really cool lab and have a lot of fun learning more about cybersecurity. Thanks, everybody. I really, you know, I guess it was just my curse to have a little bit of a hassle, but I'm glad we could make it happen and still pull it off tonight and make my first DEFCON class go off pretty well. So I appreciate that.
Listen, thank you, Lee. I really appreciate you hanging in there, and appreciate everyone else hanging in there. Sorry about all the glitches earlier. Turned out really good, though. Again, thanks so much.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And look forward, if you will, I'll be doing this again at Texas Cyber, and who knows, wherever else maybe again. But let me know if you have any questions. Drop me some emails. Have a great rest of DEFCON and enjoy the rest of the Red Team Village. You know, we're in safe mode, but hopefully we'll get to see each other all next year again. Thanks a lot.